Okay, so we are gonna start. Remember that in this module we are talking about syntax. So this is the last session of syntax. Today we're finishing with the topic of syntax. Then on the other modules, the next 4 modules, we are going to talk about the different skills related to the language teaching. Acuérdense que hoy día estamos terminando lo que es el módulo de sintaxis. Ya los siguientes módulos están más relacionados a las habilidades, ¿no? Acuérdense que estos primeros son relacionados más que todo a la lingüística y de ahí pasamos a las habilidades. And then we finish with some masters how to use the ICT, ¿no? En Spanish, the TICs, ¿no? De ahí pasamos los últimos módulos para ver lo que es los TICs, ¿no? El uso de las tecnologías para la enseñanza del inglés. So this is all the specialization program. So let's start. Can you remember what we talked about the last class? Can you remember? What was the topic of the last session? Can you remember? Tell me. What you can remember, Zoraida?
Good evening, teacher.
Good evening, Zoraida. All right. Can you tell me what we talked about the last session? ¿Qué vimos la clase pasada? ¿Se acuerdan?
Yes, teacher.
Lucy?
Yes, teacher. We talked about 2 parts of the sentence. Direct objects and direct objects. We talk about this point.
Yes, you're right. We were talking about some parts of the sentences specifically. Remember that we talked about the verb phrase, no? We were analyzing the composition, no? The composition of a verb phrase. And we were talking about the 2 kind of verbs that we use in order to make a verb phrase. We use the lexical verbs, no? Can you remember? The lexical verbs and the auxiliary verbs, no? So we have these 2 major categories when we talk about the lexical verbs and auxiliary verbs. In lexical verbs, remember that we talked about different subcategories. One of these subcategory in lexical verbs, remember this is related to lexical verbs, transitive. Then we talked about the intransitive. Can you tell me what is the difference between transitive and intransitive verbs? Can you remember? ¿Se acuerdan? ¿Cuál era la diferencia entre verbos transitivos e intransitivos?
Yes, teacher. In the case of the verb transitive, is necessary a complement. And in the other case, in the intransitive verb, it's not necessary the complement.
Yes, specifically the object, no? El objeto. Remember when we talked about the object, I'm not talking about specifically things, no? No. An object in a sentence could be referred to people, things, places. Acuérdense, cuando hablo de objeto, no quiere decir que me refiero específicamente a cosas, ¿no? Acuérdense que en oraciones se habla de sujeto, objeto, el verbo, predicado. Cuando digo objeto, puede ser una persona, puede ser una cosa, so don't forget. So transitive verbs, remember, transitive verbs take objects, as Lucy says. And intransitive verbs, they don't take objects, no objects. Then we talked about the detransitive verb. What is the detransitive verb? ¿Cuáles son los verbos detransitivos? ¿Qué significa detransitive verb? What does it mean? Detransitive verb.
In this case, we have 2 objects.
Excellent. Yes, you are right. Detransitive means that it takes 2 objects. Direct object, indirect object. Don't forget about it. And then now, today we're going to finish with this part, the intensive, complex transitive verb, and prepositional, and then we are going to add another verb. But in the last class, we were talking about the 3 first, no? transitive, intransitive, and the transitive. Now, let's make a review about them. A transitive verb, remember, requires a single noun phrase to complement it. The noun phrase complements a transitive verb is said to us its direct object. For example, Phil dreads affectionate cats. Dreads, remember the word dreads. He's afraid, and dreads is similar to say he's afraid. He's a little scared of affectionate cats. So notice dreads, affectionate cats is the verb phrase. Esa es la frase verbal. Fíjense que la clase pasada estuvimos hablando de cómo íbamos formando las frases verbales. The verb phrase. Dreads affectionate cats. Affectionate cats is the noun phrase. Es la frase nominal. And this is the object. Remember, this is the head complement relation. It's the complement of the head of this verb phrase that is the action, the verb, all right? And at the same time is the direct object. The object, remember, the object is the person or thing which is the actions, ¿no? Es la persona o cosa en la cual recae la acción, ¿no? This is the object, the direct object. So, transitive verbs take objects, all right? Take objects. And these objects are the direct object, all right? The direct object. Now, intransitive. What about intransitive? Intransitive does not require any further constituting the VP in the verb phrase. Intransitive means that has and needs no complement. Remember, no complement, no object, just the predicate, just the verb. Umar sighed. No object. All right? No object, no direct object. Just a verb. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to write just a verb. No, here you can add any other words, but not objects. For example, you could say, Omar sighed deeply. Deeply is an adverb. ¿No? Acuérdense que cuando digo que no va a haber objetos, no quiere decir que no voy a escribir nada después del verbo. No. Puedo añadir otras palabras, pero que no son objetos. No es el objeto directo. ¿No? Aquí puedo añadirle el adverbio deeply. Omar suspiró profundamente, pero ese deeply no es el objeto. Omar sighed deeply. No object. So you call this verb intransitive. Remember, verbs which don't take objects, they are called intransitive. Now, let's continue with the transitive verbs. Los verbos ditransitivos. Here, you have two NPs as complements, two noun phrases as complements. Here you have the most common examples of these kind of verbs are give, send, buy. William gave Millie some money. Notice, we have two noun phrases, Millie, some money, all right? Two objects, two noun phrases. The staff sent a general a message. Again, you have two noun phrases, two objects. Max buys his son a laptop. Again, you have two objects, all right? You have two objects. One is direct, the other is indirect. Now we talked about the difference between direct and indirect. So this is what we talked about the last class, ¿no? Eso es lo que vimos la clase pasada. Ahora vamos a terminar un poquito con lo que nos faltó para pasar a los auxiliares, ¿no? Acuérdense que estamos viendo los verbos lexicales y veíamos varios tipos de verbos lexicales. Entonces vamos a terminar con los verbos intensivos, intensive verbs. Then we pass to the complex transitive verbs. Then to the prepositional verbs, and we are going to finish with these lexical verbs talking about the famous phrasal verbs. Y terminamos este tema de los verbos lexicales con los verbos compuestos, ¿no? Los phrasal verbs, los famosos phrasal verbs. So let's see. Intensive verbs. What are the intensive verbs? Remember, this is the use of the intensive verbs. We use these verbs to describe the subject. Notice here, they describe the subject. Intensive verbs are also called copular verbs. Son los verbos copulativos. All right? Intensive verbs are also called copular verbs. The words or phrases after the verb work as the subject complement or predicative. Remember, the element that is after the verb is the complement, the subject complement, no the verb complement. Notice the other side, ¿no? Noten aquí el término, es el complemento del sujeto. En las diapositivas anteriores, el objeto directo e indirecto son complementos del verbo. They are verb complements. En cambio, con este tipo de verbos, lo que sigue después del verbo ya no va a ser complemento del verbo, sino va a ser complemento del sujeto. Por eso ahí dice que describe al sujeto, no al verbo. Miren, por eso se le llama copular verbs. Or predicatives, o también se les llama predicativos. This means they apply to the subject, not the verb. Notice here, don't forget that they apply to the subject, not the verb. They are usually followed by a noun, adjective, or a prepositional phrase. Notice, look at the examples. It is rather extravagant. The verb be, notice this is the verb be, in the third form, singular, is. The verb be is a copular verb, is an intensive verb. Why? Because this verb, as I told you before, this verb is just, it works just as a connection. Es a linking verb. ¿No se acuerdan que en las primeras clases les hablé sobre este verbo? Que era un verbo que me servía solamente de unión entre el sujeto y el complemento. This is the intensive verb and is followed by an adjective phrase. Y está seguido por una frase adjetival, ¿no? Rather extravagant. So rather extravagant is connected to the subject, is information about the subject, is describing the subject. Está describiendo al sujeto y solamente el verbo is es un conector. It's just a connector, a linker. It, the subject, and the phrase which describes the subject. Another, Sigmund was an auctioneer. Here you have again the verb be, was, in past, and then you have a noun phrase. And this noun phrase is talking about Sigmund. It's information about Sigmund. So it's the complement of the subject. Notice, or subject complement, no? Or predicative, all right? So notice here, the function of the verb was. Was is just a connector between the subject and the noun phrase or the complement. So the complement is related to the subject, not to the verb. Another example, Oscar and the first mate were in the engine room. Where, again, the verb be in past. And now it is followed by a prepositional phrase. And again, this prepositional phrase is referring to the subject, not to the verb. Notice here, now, what is the function of intensive verbs or copular verbs? They are used to describe the subject, to connect the subject and some information about the subject. And this information could be as an adjective phrase, as a noun phrase, or as a prepositional phrase. Acuérdense sobre este caso de los verbos copulativos o intensos, ¿no? Solamente me sirven de unión entre el complemento con el sujeto. Información sobre el sujeto. Y el verbo solamente es una unión, nada más. Ese complemento que va después del verbo no va a calificar al verbo, sino al sustantivo, al sujeto. Eso ahí la flechita, ¿no? The arrow. The arrow is not directed to the verb. The arrow is directed to the subject. So it's a subject complement. All right? This is a subject complement. And this complement could be an adjective phrase, a noun phrase, or a prepositional phrase, ¿no? Y este complemento puede ser una frase adjetival, una frase nominal o una frase preposicional. Acuérdense por qué se le llama adjetival, porque tiene un adjetivo, el otro tiene un sustantivo, y la tercera comienza con una preposición, ¿no? In the engine room. This is a prepositional phrase. All right? So before going to this, so don't forget about these intensive verbs. Remember, intensive verbs are the verbs which are going to be used just to link, just to connect the subject and some information about the subject. Here you have be, become, seems, appear. So this has this intensive verbs or copula verbs. Remember, intensive verbs or copula verbs. Now, let's pass to the other one. The complex transitive verbs. Complex transitive verbs take two complements, a direct object and an object complement or predicate. Notice here, Jack finds his own jokes extremely funny. Jack finds his own jokes extremely funny. So finds is the complex transitive verb. His own jokes is the noun phrase and it's the direct object. And extremely funny is an adjective phrase. Miren la composición de esta oración, ¿ah? Miren la frase verbal. Acuérdense que estamos analizando la frase verbal. La frase verbal es finds his own jokes extremely funny. Finds es el verbo transitivo complejo. His own jokes es la frase nominal o el objeto directo. Acuérdense que ese es el recae, la acción. Y luego termina con una frase adjetival, que es extremely funny. Extremely funny is giving information or is qualifying the object. That's why we call it object complement. ¿Se dan cuenta? Esa frase adjetival está dando información sobre el objeto directo. Está calificando al objeto directo. Por eso se le llama el complemento del objeto. Object complement. So notice the composition of this sentence. Jack finds his own jokes extremely funny. This extremely funny is qualifying the jokes. ¿No? Está calificando a los chistes. ¿Cómo los califica sus chistes? Extremadamente divertidos. ¿Bien? Esa es la estructura de este tipo de verbos. Acuérdense, los verbos complejos transitivos o transitivos complejos, que el verbo va a ser seguido por un objeto directo y después del objeto directo va una frase adjetival o un complemento del objeto. Another structure. They made Estela their spokesperson. Made is the complex transitive verb. Estela is the noun phrase or direct object. And their spoken person is another noun phrase. But this noun phrase is talking about Estela. Miren, noten la diferencia. Profesor, tengo de nuevo dos frases nominales. Entonces uno es objeto directo y el otro es objeto indirecto. No. Why? Because the second noun phrase is not an object. It's a complement of the object because it's giving a characteristic of the object. Está dando una característica, está calificando, cualificando al objeto directo. They made Stella their spokesperson. Notice here, this noun phrase is the object complement. All right? Is the object complement. Is not the verb complement. No está calificando al verbo. Si fuera objeto indirecto, directo en este caso, o indirecto, porque tengo el directo, ahora la posición tampoco es la correcta, ¿no? Porque acuérdense que cuando veíamos los verbos transitivos, primero va el indirecto y luego el directo. Acá tengo el directo y luego el indirecto, eso sería erróneo. Si yo pongo indirecto, tendría que agregarle el to o el for, ¿no? ¿Se acuerdan que vimos eso, no? Cuando pongo el objeto indirecto al final va a ir el to o el for. Ahora miren, esta frase nominal de spoken person puede ser confundida como un objeto indirecto, pero no, porque esa frase nominal está calificando a la otra frase nominal que vendría a ser el objeto directo. Está dándole una característica. ¿Quién es Estela? ¿Cómo la nombraron Estela? Su hablante, no es la persona que los iba a representar. The spokesperson, la persona que los iba a representar, ¿no? So they made Stella their spokesperson. Notice here, this is object complement. It's not a verb complement. All right? Another. Lisa put the liquor under her bed. Put is the complex transitive verb. The liquor is the direct object. And under her bed is the prepositional phrase. So under her bed is qualifying the object, the direct object. Information about the direct object is not about the verb, all right? It's about the object. So that's why this is an object complement. Noten entonces la estructura de estos tipos de verbos. Van a ser seguidos por objetos directos y después del objeto directo siguen una frase adjetival, una frase nominal o una frase preposicional, pero estas frases van a calificar al objeto directo, no al verbo. All right? Por eso que se les llama a estos verbos complejos transitivos. Llevan un objeto y la otra parte es la que va a calificar al objeto. No confundir, en el segundo caso, ¿no? Por eso tengo dos frases nominales. Ya, uno es directo, el otro es indirecto, es directo, indirecto. No, acá yo tengo que analizar. ¿A quién está calificando esa frase nominal? A la otra frase nominal. Quiere decir que es objeto, no es complemento del objeto. No es complemento del verbo. All right? Yes? Is it clear? Yes? So, we call these verbs complex transitive verbs. Acuérdense, así se le llama a este tipo de verbos. Son verbos que van a ser seguidos por objeto directo o una frase nominal, más un complemento del objeto predicativo. ¿Qué puede ser? Acuérdense, el complemento del objeto puede ser una frase adjetival, una frase nominal o una frase preposicional. Acuérdense que se le llama frase adjetival cuando la frase lleva el adjetivo. Frase nominal porque está el sustantivo, ¿no? Frase preposicional porque tengo una preposición, ¿no? Acuérdense de eso, ¿ok? So, these are the complex transitive verbs, all right? Complex transitive verbs. And this is the diagram, no? Jack finds his own jokes extremely funny. Este es el diagrama que formamos para estructurar la oración, ¿no? Jack is the noun phrase. The VP, acuérdense que estamos analizando las frases verbales. ¿Cómo voy formando las frases verbales? VP. The VP is structure, is composed by a verb, and this verb is complex. Then this verb is followed by a noun phrase, his own jokes, and this noun phrase is followed by an adjective phrase. Extremely funny. But this extremely funny is qualifying the noun phrase. Acuérdense, esa frase adjetival, extremely funny, está calificando a la frase nominal, no al verbo. All right? This information is about the noun phrase, the object, not about the verb. All right? It's not about the verb. Oh, don't forget your microphones, please. Yeah, okay, thank you, thank you. All right. ¿Ya? Entonces no se olviden de estos tipos de verbos. ¿Sabes? Son verbos complejos transitivos. Le sigue un objeto directo y luego le sigue un complemento del objeto. Quiere decir información acerca del objeto, no del verbo. All right? Now, let's continue with the prepositional verbs. Verbs complemented by a prepositional phrase. This is easy. So these verbs are going to be followed by prepositional phrases. Glance at, and then a noun phrase. Replies to, noun phrase. You have the preposition, so you make the prepositional phrase. Refer to, worry about, and then a noun phrase. For example, Max glanced at the falling acrobat. So you have the verb glanced, then you have the prepositional phrase, at the falling acrobat. She worries about environment. So you have another prepositional phrase, worries about, sorry about the spelling, here there's a mistake, about with the letter O. She worries about the environment. So you have here another prepositional phrase. So don't forget about these verbs. Yeah, these verbs are called prepositional verbs because they are commonly followed by a preposition. No, for example, you have the most common is listen to, look at. No, listen to me. You don't say listen me. You say listen to me. Look at. No, you say look window. No, look at the window. So these are prepositional phrases, or verbs, sorry, prepositional verbs. So verbs which are followed by a preposition. And then after this preposition, you have a noun phrase. So you are making here the prepositional phrase, no? At the falling acrobat is the prepositional phrase. About the environment is another prepositional phrase. So here you have this structure in the diagram. Max glanced at the falling acrobat. So Max is a noun phrase. Then the verb is a prepositional one, glanced. And then you have the PP, that is prepositional phrase, at the falling acrobat. So these are the prepositional verbs. And here you have a list, some of these prepositional verbs. No? Verb plus a preposition. Here you have to, for, from, at, up, and so on. Notice, for example, you have adapt to, add to, agree to, apologize to, belong to, with for, admire for, apologize for, apply for, ask for, blame for, from, staying from, borrow from, escape from, graduate from, hide from, at, aim at, arrive at, glance at, guess at, look at, laugh at, with up, bring up, grow up. So notice, here you have this prepositional verbs. Esto se les llama verbos preposicionales, porque a estos verbos le sigue una preposición y por lo tanto le va a seguir una frase preposicional. Porque tengo el at, tengo el to, tengo el for y de él le sigue una frase nominal. y ahí formo una frase preposicional. Acuérdense que la frase preposicional se forma una preposición más una frase nominal. A eso se le llama una frase preposicional. Y estos verbos están seguidos por esa frase, ¿no? That's why we call them prepositional verbs. Now, let's see. Pero, hay verbos que le van a seguir estas preposiciones, pero ya van a dejar de ser preposiciones. And this is the common phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are verbs which are formed by a verb plus a particle. Notice, look at the example. And to notice the difference, miren la diferencia que vamos a tener entre los verbos preposicionales y los verbos compuestos, ¿no? Los famosos phrasal verbs. Hay una diferencia, ¿ya? En la escritura son iguales, porque ambas, viendo la escritura, parece que ambas utilizan preposiciones. En una se le llama preposición, en la otra ya no se le llama preposición, se le llama partícula. Verb plus a particle. For example, he woke up at 6:30 a.m. or 6:30. So here you have strangers waking up. Notice here that you have this verb and you have this, I don't know if it is clear, you're focusing on up. Up. Notice here up. Up is here a particle. It's not a preposition. It looks like a preposition, but it doesn't function as a preposition. All right? Notice here, up is not a preposition here. It's a particle. All right? So the phrasal verbs are composed by a verb plus a particle, not a preposition. It seems to be a preposition, but it's not. All right? It's not. So let's see. Notice here, we have here another example. Particles are part of the verb phrase and they often change. Notice here, this is the difference with the prepositional verbs. When you use a prepositional verb, the preposition doesn't change the meaning of the original verb. But when you use it as a particle, we often change the meaning of the verb. Notice here the example. He looked up at the skyscraper. Notice, he looked up at the skyscraper. So up here is the preposition. He looked up at the skyscraper. So you're indicating the direction. Where is the person looking? Oh, up. All right, not down, up. And look up. So you're giving a direction of your looking. All right? So this is a preposition. But notice the other example. She looked up a word in her dictionary. Look up, again, the same. All right? It's the same, es lo mismo. Miren, ¿eh? Looked up, looked up. But now it's not a preposition. It's a particle. Oh, sorry. Why? Because you changed the meaning of look. What is the meaning of looked up here? ¿Qué significa ese looked up en la segunda oración?
It's looking for something.
Yeah, some date, some information in a book, in a dictionary, in a notebook. So you change the meaning. Notice, you change the meaning. Looked up in the second sentence has another meaning as in the first sentence. Estoy cambiando el significado. Miren, es el mismo verbo de manera escrita, pero el significado es diferente. En la primera oración, ese up sí es una preposición porque me está indicando hacia dónde está mirando el chico. Ah, he looked up, no, hacia dónde miró el chico, ¿no? He looked up at the skyscraper. Ahí es una preposición, ahí es un verbo preposicional. Pero en la segunda oración ya no es un verbo preposicional. Ahí el up ya no es una preposición. Ahora es una partícula porque es parte del verbo. Esos dos tienen un solo significado y por lo general es diferente al verbo original. En este caso, looked up es buscar. She looked up a word in her dictionary. Me dice que ella buscó una palabra en su diccionario. This is a phrasal verb. Remember, this is a phrasal verb. It's not a prepositional verb. It's a phrasal verb. Now, let's continue talking. Many phrasal verbs and one-word verbs have similar meanings. For example, wake up is similar to say awaken. Go on, continue. Take off, remove. As in the example, no? In this picture. Remove, take off. Phrasal verbs are less formal and more common in everyday speech. This is very important to remember. We use these phrasal verbs mostly when we speak. They are not so formal. That's why some situations when you hear a native speaker talking, it's a kind of difficult to understand this person, right? Because they used to use this kind of verbs. These kind of phrasal verbs. They don't use continue, remove, no. They say go on, take off, all right? So it's very important to know these phrasal verbs. As all the other verbs, these are going to be divided in transitive and intransitive verbs. Let's see the transitive phrasal verbs. Transitive.
Teacher.
Yeah, tell me.
Excuse me, I have a question before.
Yeah.
Teacher, you said it's according to the function of the sentence, no? Can be the preposition or particle, no?
Uh-huh.
For example, we have in this case, for example, get up. One example is a phrasal verb.
Uh-huh, get up, yes.
Get up is a particle. The same way get up can be, in some case, in some situation, can be a preposition as well, or not?
Not exactly, because get, as you know, has a meaning, right? Get es conseguir, alcanzar, lograr.
Exactly.
No tiene nada que ver con levantarse. Sería el get up.
It happens only with some verbs, like look up in this case.
Yeah, you could use get as a prepositional with other particles. Get from, for example, no? Oh, I'm getting from my partner watch. Ahí sí es una frase preposicional, un verbo preposicional, ¿no? Get from, conseguir de. Pero no le cambia el significado. Remember, when we change the meaning of the original verb, this is a particle. When we don't change the meaning of the original verb, it's a preposition. Yes?
Okay, teacher. Only right. It happens only with some verbs or phrasal verbs, no?
All right. Okay. We can make phrasal verbs with many verbs. Yeah. The next part, the preposition is the important part here. La preposición es lo que va a contar. Si esa palabrita no le cambia el significado al verbo, es una preposición, porque solamente me está dando, funciona como un conector con la otra frase nominal, de dónde, hacia, ¿no? Me está indicando un movimiento, lugar. Pero si esa palabrita me cambia el significado del verbo original, ya deja de ser una preposición y pasa a ser una partícula, que es parte del verbo compuesto, ¿no? Eso es lo que quiero que entiendan. La diferencia entre una preposición y una partícula.
It's important to realize about the function of the sentence or about the meaning in this case.
Uh-huh. Yes, exactly. Yes, you're right. This is very important to analyze the context and the meaning of these words. Yes, you're right. Okay, so that's good. Very good, very good. So let's continue here. Remember, transitive, we have seen it before, ¿no? Ya hemos visto que son los verbos transitivos. Lo mismo va a pasar con los verbos compuestos. También va a haber verbos compuestos transitivos, intransitivos. transitive phrasal verbs have objects. Most transitive phrasal verbs are separable. For example, he called up his boss to tell me he had overslept. Here you have the object, his boss. And notice the other sentence. He called his boss up to tell him he had overslept. So notice that we can separate. Notice that we can separate the phrasal verb. We can split. Lo podemos dividir. Miren, yo puedo separar. Cuando este verbo compuesto le sigue un objeto, lo puedo separar. Notice here. Call up, in the first sentence, call up is together. All right? Is together. Then you have the object. No? Then you have the object. Call up his boss. All right? But now, in the second sentence, the verb is divided. Called up. And it has the object in between. You separate it. He called his boss up to tell me he had overslept. Noten algo muy importante con este tipo de verbos transitivos, que los puedo separar. Si quiero los escribo junto o si quiero los separo. He called up his boss or he called his boss up. Notice here that transitive phrasal verbs can be separated. They can be split. All right? So you can divide this verb in two. And between, you have to write the object, the direct object. So here, notice the object, the position of the object is between the verb and the particle. So the verb, the phrasal verb was separated. All right? It was separated. The object can come after the phrasal verb or between the verb and the particle. At the last minute, the bride called off the wedding. Notice the object is after the phrasal verb or between. At the last minute, the bride called the wedding off. So the object is between the verb and the particle. All right? Remember the call off is cancel, no? The meaning of call off is cancel. So the bride called off the wedding. The bride called the wedding off. So you can separate, all right? You can separate the transitive verbs. Be careful. There is something important. When the object is a pronoun, notice here, when the object is a pronoun, it must come between the verb and the particle. So you cannot write the object when it's a pronoun. Remember, an object pronoun. When you have an object pronoun, you cannot write the object pronoun after the phrasal verb. No. So the object pronoun must be between the verb and the particle. Acuérdense esto muy importante también. Si el objeto directo es un pronombre, el pronombre tiene que estar en medio, entre el verbo y la partícula. Nunca se escribe después del verbo compuesto, ¿no? Del verbo compuesto. Call up, ¿no? Call up is the phrasal verb. Call up her? No. So you say, a friend called her up at work. All right? And don't forget, this is very important to remember. If the object is a pronoun, so it must come between the verb and the particle. Don't forget that on the other side, when you have the noun phrase, so it could be after the phrasal verb or between the verb and the particle. But when it's a pronoun, no, just in between the verb and the particle. So don't forget about this in the transitive verbs. Now, here we're going to practice just a little bit, all right? So we are going to use each of the phrasal verbs to form 3 sentences about things that sometimes happen. For example, I'm going to give you an example. Wake up. Remember, wake up is similar to say awaken. So you say, the baby often wakes up the parents. Well, this is something that usually happens, no? When you're father or mother, no? The middle of the night, the baby woke up. So the baby often wakes up the parents. The second way that you can write it is in this way. The baby often wakes the parents up. You separate it, all right? You separate it. Notice in the first sentence, you don't divide the phrasal verb. So you say the baby often wakes up the parents, but in the second, you separate, you divide. The baby often wakes the parents up. And the third way is using the pronoun, the object pronoun. The baby often wakes them up. Remember, when we use the object pronoun must come between the verb and the particle. All right? So this is what you're going to do now. So in the chat here, you're going to write sentences, 3 sentences using these verbs below. Using the verb pick out, the meaning of pick out is select. Figure out, the meaning is solve. Hand in, submit, give. Take off, remove. Make up, create. Let down, disappoint. So you are going to create sentences, 3 sentences per each one. All right? So I'm going to give you some minutes. Or maybe you choose, because we have 6, we don't have so much time. So choose 2 of these verbs and try to create sentences, 3 sentences per each verb, per each phrasal verb. Pick out, figure out. You have to use this. Don't use select, solve. No. The phrasal verb, yeah? The phrasal verb. You must use the phrasal verb. Pick out. So you have here the meaning in order to know what you're going to write, okay? Pick out is select. Figure out, solve. Hand in, submit, give. Take off, remove. Make up, create. Let down, disappoint. For example, there is a very common song from the Beatles, no? Don't let me down. No? Have you heard this song? Let me down. It means don't disappoint me. No, don't let me down. So notice that you hear the song, you are using the object pronoun between, all right? Let me down. It's not let down me. No, it's not possible to do that. So let me down. So notice
What
here. Tell me, Vanessa.
we have to create 1 sentence with
3 sentences per each verb. Similar to the example. First, with the phrasal verb together.
3 with pick out, 3 with figure out, 3 with hand in, 3 with take off.
Yeah, but I think they're too much. So just choose 2 of these verbs. Just 2
of this,
verbs,
yes. But 3 sentences.
We have 6, it means 18 sentences. Whoa. Too many sentences. All right? Just 6 sentences. 2. Just 2 of this. Right? 2 of this. So I'm gonna give you, here I have some of them. Ya me están escribiendo aquí por el chat. Muy bien, muy bien. Voy revisando aquí las oraciones en el chat. That's it. Cindy, that girl picked out newspapers last Monday. Yeah, that girl, those, si es plural, those girls picked newspapers out last Monday. That girl picked them last Monday. Pick them out. Don't forget, Cindy. Out, all right? Pick out. Abraham, I don't want to let my fiancé down. Yeah, yes, Abraham, yes. We mostly do that. All right, yeah. That's it. Yeah, Abraham, 3 with let down. Yeah, everybody, choose 2 of these verbs. Laura, yes. That's it, Laura. You won't let me down, will you? Yes. Flor, I have to pick out a dress for tonight. Yes. Excellent, Vanessa. Please take off your shoes, or take your shoes off, or take them off. Excellent. That's it. That's it. Very good. Very good. Yeah, everyone, write your answers, your sentences in the chat. Lucy, Mary, Ruth, Zoraida, Tanya, Valeria, Yuri. That's it, Lucy. My mother is trying to pick out the cool kernels. Yes, that's right. Now transform it, Lucy. Now divide, split the phrasal verb. No more, no more, no more. No more sentences, no more sentences. I have just from Cindy, Abraham, Laura, Flor, Vanessa, Lucy. What about the other ones? Zoraida. My aunt picked out an elegant dress yesterday. My aunt picked an elegant dress out yesterday. My aunt picked it out yesterday. Excellent. Don't forget, just as Zoraida, if you're writing the sentences in past, so the verb must be in past form, ed, no? Don't forget it, Zoraida. Laura, I promise I will make it up to you. Yeah, but here, remember, yeah, create, yeah, okay, Laura. No more sentences. All right, Vanessa. I picked out some papers yesterday. I picked some papers out yesterday. I picked them out yesterday. Excellent, Vanessa. That's it. That's it. So here you have these phrasal verbs. Don't forget, these are the transitive phrasal verbs. They could be divided. They could be divided. You use the noun phrase to divide it. But if you use the object pronoun must be between, in between, no at the end, no after the phrasal verb. Don't forget about this rule with you use the object pronouns in transitive phrasal verbs. All right, Zoraida, the children took off their shoes before going to bed. The children took their shoes off before going to bed. The children took them off before going to bed. Yes, that's it. Very good. Before going. And remember, after prepositions, the verb must be with the ing form. Before going, after going. Don't forget to do that. All right, that's good. Very good, Zoraida. Yes, that's it. That's it. No more volunteers. I'm checking your sentences here in the chat. All right, 2 minutes to pass to the other activity, to pass to the other topic related to the intransitive or phrasal verbs. No more sentences. Okay, here we have one more. I barely took off my shoes last night to sleep. Okay, Abraham, that's it. That's right. Okay, so don't forget about these transitive phrasal verbs and remember about them. Lucy, my mother is trying to pick the concurrents out. My mother is trying to pick them out. Yes, pick them out. No, don't forget the particle. Pick them out. All right, that's it, Lucy. Very good. Okay, let's continue. Now, let's pass to the intransitive phrasal verbs. Intransitive phrasal verbs do not have objects. Notice here, no objects. He grew up in Egypt. No object. She will hang up before she gets into her car. No object. So here you have some phrases, but no objects. All right. In Egypt is a prepositional phrase. Before she gets into her car is an adverbial phrase, but we don't have any object. First, teacher. Yeah, tell me.
Excuse me, teacher. Question, teacher.
Yeah, tell me.
How do we realize if the verbs are phrasal verbs are intransitive or transitive in this case?
Yeah, here you must use a little of your memory. You must remember, all right? Now, the other way to recognize is using a dictionary. In the dictionary, here you have some information about the verb. If it is transitive, intransitive, also you find the different phrasal verbs that you can make with a verb. If they are transitive too, they can be separable or not separable, transitive or intransitive. So here you have to look up, because there is not a specific rule. Yeah, these verbs are transitive, these verbs are intransitive, because sometimes some verbs are both transitive and intransitive. So here, there is no specific rule about it.
Teachers, is the same way important to use the logic sense?
Yeah, could be because of the meaning, no? The meaning, for example, workout means do exercises. So here you know that this is not followed by an object, no? There is nothing that can take the action, right?
When I teach to my students, I teach in this way. I try to teach in this way to get attention, or their attention in this case, no?
Yes, that's it. So this is a good option, no? But remember, the student must be conscious about the meaning of the verb, no? In order to realize if it's gonna be followed by an object or not, no? So it's very important to know the meaning of the verb. So I'd advise you, maybe as a teacher, to check up this information in a dictionary, and you need to practice and use it. This is very important to use it. Now, when we teach this kind of verbs to our students, sometimes we use these kind of verbs in context, no? In some specific context. For example, when I try to teach these verbs to my students, I don't teach them this transitive or intransitive, because this is more complex to them to understand. So it's so tricky. I try to make my students to remember these phrasal verbs, to use them in context, and they need to internalize, no? Internalize. They are not going to analyze if it is followed by an object or no object, because maybe they can get confused. So the most important here is to the students internalize these verbs and use them in different contexts. For example, this verb, workout is used when you talk about doing exercises or keeping healthy or keeping fit. So there are some verbs, some phrasal verbs that we use, and they use it. And then they are going to internalize that this verb is not followed by any other object, no? Because when you talk about objects, no objects, direct objects, indirect objects, maybe the students are going to be confused. Maybe you teach to students at advanced levels or upper intermediate levels. Maybe you can explain them this difference between objects in the direct, indirect, of no objects, or with objects, because it's a little tricky. The students are, oh, teacher, no, what is that? The object, no object. The most important is to teach them when to use it and to internalize the meaning of these verbs. This is the most important. Then they are going to realize if it is transitive or intransitive, you know. As a teacher, you must know, because you're going to teach and you must know exactly the syntax, the grammar of this language. But as a student, the most important is that they use these verbs. They use and they recognize these verbs. Then, as I told you before, they are going to notice if this is transitive or intransitive. As I told you, when I teach phrasal verbs to my students, I don't talk to them if the verbs are transitive, intransitive. For example, I show these verbs in context. For example, to talk about computing, or to talk about clothes, or to talk about medicine or health. Which verbs, which phrasal verbs do we use? I think this is the most important for students to know, how to use them, all right, in different contexts. If you go to the grammar, I mean that is not good. No, it's good that they could know if it is the verb transitive or intransitive. Yeah, it's good. They are going to, for example, if they are going to take an international exam or any other exam, yeah, it's good to know if the verb is transitive or intransitive, right? But I think the most important is to use these verbs, not to recognize these verbs, and they start using it. I think this is the most important, right? But it's good. Your option is good. Yeah, it's a good way to teach the students the phrasal verbs because they are tricky. They are tricky. They are not so easy. They are not so easy to teach because they confuse teacher up, down, to, and they change the meaning. Oh, oh, teacher, it's so complicated. Oh. So I try to give them in context, no? In context. Then some of the students ask you, teacher, this verb is with a person, is followed by a person, this not, you can explain that. No, you can explain that. That's good. That's good, Abraham. That's right. So,
teacher, because I was asking about this nowadays, because according to the advance of technology, students very intelligent, smart. You know, they learn about everything. Sometimes they ask you, no?
Yes, yes, you're right.
You have to be ready as a teacher, no?
Yes, yes, yes. So that's what I told you. If a student asks you, what is transit, and you don't know, so you must be prepared, no? You must be prepared. Exactly. If a student asks you, oh, so this is it, and they can understand better, no? They can understand better. That's right. That's good, Abraham. That's right. So here, notice, first I worked out for an hour, no object. Then I dressed up and dropped in at the party. And no one found out that I didn't have an invitation. So all of these verbs don't have objects, all right? Now notice they are presented in a context. Some activities that this person do, no? Before going to a party, maybe, no? She's talking about some activity that she did before going to a party. First, I worked out for an hour. Then I dressed up and dropped in at the party. No one found out that I didn't have an invitation. Notice that here you're presenting the phrasal verbs in a context, all right? In a context. And all of them are intransitive. No objects, all right? You don't have any objects here. Be careful. Note a difference in meaning between make, make up, transitive, and make up, intransitive. Notice this verb make up could be transitive, and at the same time, it could be intransitive, but the meaning changed. Notice, make up is not used when you talk about dinner, no? Make dinner, make is prepare, no? Here, the meaning of make is prepare. I make dinner every night. What about make up? Notice a story. When it's followed by a story, he made up a story about Jill and Joe. Make up here means invent. All right? Invent. And notice here's his transitive. But when make up means reconcile, it's intransitive. They made up. They were friends again. So notice here that some phrasal verbs are transitive and at the same time, they can be intransitive, but the meaning is different. He made up a story about Jill and Joe. Here you're using make up as a transitive. It means invent, all right? Invent. But notice the third sentence. They made up, no object. So this is intransitive. What is the meaning? Reconcile. So maybe these friends were against each other, no? But now they are friends again, no? They are friends again.
Because the relationship was broken.
Yes. They broken up the relationship. They broke up the relationship. This friendship, no? The friendship was broken up. So made up is to be friends again. So the relation is good again. All right? So notice here, be careful on that. Yeah? So sometimes some verbs, phrasal verbs are transitive, and at the same time, they could be intransitive too. But there is a difference in the meaning. ¿Ya? Acuérdense esto. Por eso hay que tener mucho cuidado con estos verbos, ¿no? Pero les decía, Si hay veces profundizamos mucho a los alumnos, estos aspectos se van a hacer un mundo. Más que todo es que lo utilicen, en qué situaciones, eso es lo más importante. Si ya los alumnos, como ya Bran lo acaba de decir, ¿no? Y eso es muy cierto, con la tecnología, con el internet, ellos investigan, buscan. Por eso es muy importante como docentes saber estos conceptos, porque si hay un alumno que ha investigado, y profesor, ¿y qué es un verbo transitivo? ¿Cuál sería transitivo? Y no sabemos, ahí sí estamos en problemas, ¿no? Entonces siempre es muy importante saber, ¿no? Es muy, muy importante saber. Y esto, yo siempre les recomiendo algo, ¿no? Hay veces cuando uno busca información en un diccionario, hay que darle una pausa, no pasar muy rápido. El diccionario te da mucha información. A veces solamente lo utilizamos como un mero traductor, ¿no? No, hay que utilizarlo al máximo. Como docentes, tenemos que utilizarlo al máximo. Y si es monolingüe, mejor todavía. Porque ahí te dice si el verbo es transitivo, intransitivo, qué verbos compuestos yo puedo formar con ese verbo, y si esos verbos compuestos también son transitivos o no. No sé si han visto en los diccionarios, cuando tienen estos tipos de verbos, está dividido por la abreviatura STH, no sé si habrán visto, o SB.
Yes.
Yes. Ya, eso quiere decir que sigue un objeto. Si no hay esa abreviatura, quiere decir que no hay objeto. Quiere decir que es intransitivo. Si hay esa abreviatura STH, que es something, o SB, que es somebody, quiere decir que hay objeto. Y si lo ven al medio, quiere decir que puede ser separado. Toda esa información me la brinda un diccionario, sino que hay veces por el apuro, por el tiempo, ¿no? Ya rapidito, nomás buscamos, ya esto ya listo, lo cerramos. Entonces hay que detenernos un poquito y buscar esta información. A ver, ¿qué es esto? ¿Es un verbo transitivo, intransitivo? ¿Qué verbos compuestos puedo formar yo con este verbo? De repente voy creando ahí mi glosario, ¿no? Para ir reconociendo. O también formar grupos, ¿no? Por ejemplo, yo generalmente yo utilizaba como cartas, ¿no? Como posters, verbos con phrasal verbs with a verb look. Y ahí lo juntaba, ¿no? Phrasal verbs with a verb get. Y así, y los juntaba. Y así íbamos agrupando, ¿no? Por verbo, qué verbos compuestos podía formar. Esa es la manera, ¿no? Entonces ir formando así. Y igual ustedes, ¿no? Como docentes tenemos que pausar un poquito y ver bien la información en el diccionario. Y ahora que tenemos la tecnología, mejor, ¿no? Longman, creo que ya les mostré la vez pasada utilizar un diccionario en línea, si no me equivoco, o no. Longman Online Dictionary.
Yes, teacher.
Yes, all right. Entonces utilizan al máximo este diccionario Longman. Tiene varios, ¿eh? Longman, Oxford, Cambridge, Macmillan, Pearson. There are a lot. So use them. And you can install on your cell phone, your smartphones too, right? As an app, no? If you're using an Android Play Store, you're using iOS, no? This is from Apple, I think so. So you can install this, no? Use them, use technology, as Abraham says. Technology nowadays is so important. It's so important for teachers, all right? Because you have a lot of help with some technical tools and instruments. All right. Okay. So notice here this phrasal verbs. Yeah, tell me.
Teacher, talking about the verb, you mentioning about this, in this case, about the verb make up, can be transitive and intransitive. At the same time, I was researching about this verb. Make up is a noun, eh?
Exactly. For women, no? Yes, that's it. Makeup is a compound noun.
So.
Yeah, that's it. Very good. Yes, makeup. Exactly. Muy bien. Eso también es otro punto. En inglés, una palabra puede ser verbo, puede ser sustantivo, puede ser adverbio. Por ejemplo, like. Like es un verbo. También es un adverbio. ¿Eh? El verbo o la palabra book, libro, book, pero también es un verbo. Water también es verbo. Entonces, eso también, ver que una palabra en inglés puede tener varios usos, no solamente uno, puede ser verbo, puede ser sustantivo, puede ser adverbio, ¿no? Live, por ejemplo, live puede ser verbo, pero también adjetivo. Live es un adjetivo, pero como verbo es live, ¿no? Cambia la pronunciación, ¿no? Live concert, por ejemplo, live concert, pero no era
Live
live.
news.
Live concert. That's it. So notice, this is very important. As a teacher, we must stop. When we use a dictionary, in a dictionary, you find a lot of information. Pronunciation, stress, number of syllables, meanings, the use of this word in different contexts, phrasal verbs, is the verb is transitive, intransitive. So you have a lot of information. So you must analyze it. All right. Now, here we are going to use here. Yeah, because of the time, I'm going to give you this slide, so don't worry. So at home you can practice. Yeah, because of the time we have to continue because we are having not enough time. Now, we finish here talking about the lexical verbs. Remember, lexical verbs are transitive, intransitive, detransitive, intensive, complex transitive, and prepositional verbs. And finally, we made a comparison with the phrasal verbs. No, don't forget there is a difference between the prepositional verbs and the phrasal verbs. When you write, they could be similar because you see up, prepositions, but some of them are as a preposition and some of them are as a particle. Now, the other component of a verb phrase is the auxiliary verbs. So remember, you have these lexical verbs. They can act as a main verbs. Its meaning is clear and identifiable. It means saying. Modal verbs, they can act only as auxiliaries. Remember, modal verbs are only auxiliaries. Here we have will, could, should, can, must. And then we have the primary verbs. Primary verbs, they can act as a main or auxiliary verb. So here we have be, have, and do. ¿No? Acuérdense que tenemos estos tres tipos. Verbos lexicales, verbos modales, y verbos primarios. Modal verbs are just auxiliaries. Acuérdense, los verbos modales solamente son verbos auxiliares. Primary verbs, they can be lexical or main, or auxiliaries. Be, have, and do. ¿No? Acuérdense que este be puede ser auxiliar y puede ser principal, como intenso, ¿no? Como verbo copulativo. Have, lo mismo. Puede ser auxiliar o puede ser verbo principal. Do también, ¿no? Verbo principal o verbo auxiliar. So these are primary verbs. Remember that when we talk about a verb phrase, we have two functional parts, the auxiliary verb and the lexical verb, no? Look at the example. Filled. Daisy fills or filled the pool. Write. Max writes or wrote nothing. Daisy will or would fill the pool. So you're adding, notice, you're adding an auxiliary. Max can or could write nothing. Daisy has or had filled the pool. Max has or had written nothing. Daisy is or was filling the pool. Max is or was writing nothing. The pool is or was filled. Nothing is or was written. So here you have the different forms that we can write a verb. First, as a lexical. In the first sentence, you have the lexical, just the lexical. Fills, present, filled, past. The same happens with write. Max writes. Present, Max wrote, past, just the lexical. But from the second to the fifth sentence, to the sixth sentence, sorry. So you have here with auxiliaries. depending on the context that you're using them, no? Will, would fill the pool, can, could write nothing. In the third sentence, you have the perfect tense. Daisy has or had filled the pool. Max has or had written nothing. You have perfect tenses, present perfect and past perfect. No, has filled is present perfect. Had filled is past perfect. The same happens with irregular verb. Here we have regular and irregular. Max has written. Max had written. Then we have the continuous form, the verb be plus the verb plus ing, present continuous, past continuous. We have more continuous tenses, no? But this is the most principal. Daisy is filling the pool, or Daisy was filling the pool, no? Present continuous, past continuous. Max is writing nothing, or Max was writing nothing. So we have again present continuous and past continuous. And finally, at the last part, you have here the passive voice. The pool is filled, or the pool was filled. Nothing is written. Nothing was written. Notice that we have here the passive voice. How do we make the passive voice? Using the verb be plus the past participle verb, ¿no? Acuérdense que estamos viendo los verbos tanto regular e irregular en las formas en que yo voy poniéndolos, ¿no? Utilizando primero el verbo lexical, ya sea en el tiempo en que yo quiera ponerlo, presente simple, pasado simple. Luego tengo ya las demás oraciones utilizando los auxiliares, will, futuro, would, un pasado, can, could, donde ya voy hablando de funciones, de contextos, ¿no? Permisos, posibilidades, habilidades. De ahí tengo tiempos, utilizando el verbo have, tiempos perfectos, presente perfecto, pasado perfecto. Luego tengo los continuos, creo que aquí hay más, no solamente son estos. Tengo el presente continuo, el pasado continuo, ¿no? Y tengo más, presente perfecto continuo, pasado perfecto continuo, ¿no? Futuro perfecto continuo. Tenemos más tiempos. Solamente para que reconozcan cómo vamos a ir formando las frases verbales. Y por último, tell me.
Teacher, I have maybe a different question. Maybe you did before, sorry, at the beginning it was difficult for me to get into the Zoom. We have some verbs we can never use as with ing, like no, like stative verbs or one, no?
Yes.
However, I see sometimes the word knowing.
Yeah, the stative verbs. Yeah. Sometimes you can use this stative verbs with the ing, but with a different meaning. For example, no, when you say think as a belief is a stative verb. But think as the action of processing information, you can use it with the ing. But knowing, let me think, knowing I think is rare to use know with the ing. Yeah, but it could have another meaning, maybe the context, not the context. But I saw with think, then you have, for example, have within means possess. You cannot write it with the ing. But when you have, for example, have breakfast or have dinner or have fun, so you could use with the ing. So here, remember, the stative verbs are used when you talked about senses, emotions, feelings, and they are not used as a dynamic verb. No? So here we have a stative and dynamic verb. Stative verbs refers to emotions, feelings, states. Dynamic refers to actions. So as you told us, we have this difference, no, with the ing. Stative verbs and dynamic verbs. Dynamic verbs are used with the ing forms. The stative verbs are not used with the ing forms, but the meaning is different, all right? I think, for example, no, when you say, I think the president will do good things. So think here, the meaning of think is believe. But when you say, I'm thinking of you all the time. So you're talking about that you are making the process, you're processing that information, you're having some ideas about that person. So you could write it with the ing. Yeah, so this is the principal difference when you use with ing or no ing. No ing, when you talked about states, emotions, feelings. And the other one, use it as a verb and action. All right?
Thanks, teacher. The same way, some verbs that finish with ing can be nouns, eh? I am right?
Exactly, yes, you're right. This is a gerund. Ahí se le cambia el nombre, es un gerundio. Cuando se utiliza como sujeto. Swimming is good for you, for example. Now, also the ing, also you could use this as an adjective too, no? Interesting, exciting, amazing. So, as I told you, one word can have different uses. In English, you could have different uses. No, swimming, smoking. No? So here you use as a noun because it's a gerund. Ahí lo llamamos gerund, gerundio. ¿Ya? Porque funciona como un sustantivo o como un objeto también, ¿no? Cuando tengo estos verbos, cuando van dos verbos, por ejemplo, I love swimming. I love swimming. Swimming ahí es un gerundio, no es un participio. ¿Se acuerdan cuando vimos el presente continuo, ese ing? Yo lo llamaba presente participio. Pero cuando formo el tiempo continuo, el verbo to be más el verbo con ing. Ahí ese ing se le llama presente participio. Pero cuando yo tengo la estructura, I love cooking, I love dancing, ahí ese ing funciona como un objeto, como un complemento. Se le llama gerundio. Eso es lo que se está refiriendo aquí nuestro compañero Abraham, ¿no? Puede ser un sustantivo o puede ser un objeto también, ¿no? Cuando va después de otro verbo que va a ir con ing, ¿no? Acuérdense que hay una lista, ¿no? Verbos que le siguen o van a ser seguidos por otro verbo con ing y verbos que le va a ser seguido por un verbo en infinitivo, ¿no? Y tenemos son los complementos del verbo, ¿no? Objeto del verbo, como vimos un poquito el término hace un momento, ¿ya? Yes, you are right. The ing is also a noun. It's also an adjective, ¿no? Remember that ed, this past participle form, is also an adjective too. También se utiliza el ed como adjetivo, ¿no? ¿Se acuerdan que vimos eso en la clase pasada? La diferencia entre el ing como adjetivo con el ed como adjetivo, ¿no? También se pueden utilizar. Pero aquí estamos viendo, acuérdense, la estructura del tiempo continuo, donde tengo que utilizar el verbo to be más el verbo con ing. Esa es la estructura que estamos viendo aquí. But that's right, Abraham. That's it. Very good, very good. All right, so notice here that we have these verbs, and the structure of these verb phrases using auxiliaries, all right? We're talking about the auxiliaries. Now, I think it's here, yeah. There's always just a first verb that displays the tense distinction between the present and past, all right? Remember, B, auxiliary verbs always precede the lexical verb. Remember, yeah, always precede the lexical. Oh, sorry, my little kid. All right, yeah, my little kid was running around. Okay, and he fell down. Now, auxiliary verbs always precede the lexical verb, remember, yeah? Don't forget about it. The form of a verb is determined by the verb that precedes it. Yeah? Don't forget, after the auxiliaries, the modal auxiliaries, so the verb must be in the basic form. But when you have be or have, here you are going to change the form. It depends. No? You use be, could be followed by the past participle, you use the passive voice, or it is followed by a present participle, you use the continuous tense. So notice that you change, no? Have or had is followed by the past participle form. So here, the form of the verb is determined by the verb that precedes it. Don't forget about it. Then, when we talk about here, the auxiliary verbs, we're going to talk about tense and time. Tense is the time described by the verb, shown by its grammatical form. There are two main tenses in English, present tense and past tense. Present tense, things that are true when the words are spoken or written. And past tense, things that were true before the words were spoken or written. So we have two main tenses in English. What about the future? Teacher, knows the future is not a tense? So future is expressible in a variety of ways. For example, you could use will. He will go to the party. You could use present tense. Notice, to talk about the future, you could use present tense. The boat leaves at 10 tonight. You could use past tense, future time. If he gave me the money tomorrow, I'd use it. So here you're using a second conditional, using the past tense, but you are talking about a future tense, a real future time. Notice that's why the future is not considered exactly a tense, because it could be expressed in many different ways. Also, you use the continuous form, not to talk about the future when you talked about fixed arrangements. You use going to. Notice, to talk about the future, you use a lot of forms, not just one form. That's why it's not considered exactly a tense, all right? Because you use a lot of structures to talk about future, and inside this structure, you use tenses. You use present tense to talk about future. You use past tense to talk about future. You use continuous tense to talk about future. That's why future is not considered a tense, because it could be expressed in a variety of forms. Acuérdense, el futuro no se le va a tomar como un tiempo, tense. Acuérdense, tense. En inglés se dice tense. Exactamente porque se puede expresar de muchas formas, con muchas estructuras o con otros tiempos. La más común, la más utilizada, will. Pero también puedo hablar de futuro utilizando el presente, el tiempo presente simple. Cuando hablo de horarios, ¿no? Schedules. Timetables. The boat leaves at 10 to 9. Or the movie or the film starts at 8 p.m. All right? Or in conditional, for example, in the last sentence, if he gave me the money tomorrow, I'd use it. All right, just give me a second.
Teacher, using the verb to be as well, no? Example, I say, I'm doing my homework tomorrow.
This is a continuous. Yes, this is a continuous, present continuous tense, but you are talking about the future. A fixed arrangement.
Future would be going to?
Going to, yes, plans, intentions.
Going to?
Yes, that's it. Going to is to talk about plans, intentions. Notice, we are using different structures and also tenses to talk about the future. That's why future is not considered a tense. Acuérdense eso. Ya tenemos dos tiempos principales, present and past. But the future is not exactly a tense.
According to you, we cannot say the future tense?
No. It's not advisable to use.
That's why in books, they say, in books, we can see future with be going to, future with will.
Exactly. Exactly. That's it.
It doesn't say future tense. No, like past tense, simple present tense.
Exactly.
Tense. Okay.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, tell me.
What's the difference between will and going to?
Oh, yeah. Will, remember, will and going to have different uses. Will, for example, you use it to talk about promises, offers, on the spot, decisions, predictions. For example, there is a similarity between will and going to. Will and going to are both to talk of both used to talk about predictions. Ambos se utilizan para predicciones. What is the difference? Will, a prediction with no evidence, just based on what you think or what you heard. But going to is a prediction based with something, with an evidence. Acuérdense, esa es la diferencia entre will y going to, ¿no? Will se utiliza para hablar de predicciones sin base, solo con lo que yo creo, con lo que yo opino, o con lo que he escuchado. En cambio, el going to es con una base, con una evidencia. Yo hago predicción basada en algo. Ahí es la diferencia entre will y going to. Ahora, otra de las diferencias es que will también se habla sobre planes futuros, pero lejanos. Más como un deseo, un anhelo. En cambio, el going to ya es un plan, es una intención, ya tengo una idea de realizarlo. Yo, por ejemplo, hay veces pongo esta situación, ¿no? Siempre, acuérdense que las estructuras gramaticales siempre hay que contextualizarlas, porque si solamente les decimos, ya, se usa así, se arma así, los chicos a veces no lo entienden. Yo, por ejemplo, lo contextualizo, le digo, imaginemos, claro que ahora en estos tiempos ya ha cambiado bastante eso, imaginemos a una chica, está con sus 14, 15, 16 añitos, y en un futuro anhela llegar a casarse. Entonces esta niña dice, ¿no? Esta adolescente o jovencita dice, ¿no? Oh, I will marry soon. Oh, someday, ¿no? Someday, no someday. I will marry someday. It's a desire, it's a wish. In the long future. Pasa el tiempo, ya tiene su enamorado, su novio, ¿no? Y planean casarse. Entonces ella dice, I am going to marry next year. Miren, ya estamos contextualizando. Going to, ya está algo planeado, ya tiene, de repente ya el novio ha pedido la mano, ya están planeando casarse para el próximo año. Pasa el año, ya queda una semanita para la boda, ya todo está listado, arreglado, ya han separado la iglesia, ya saben cuántos invitados van a ir a la fiesta o a la ceremonia. Entonces la chica dice, I am marrying next week. Es a fixed arrangement, a menos que la novia a último momento decida que no. Todo ya está arreglado, planeado, ya han mandado las invitaciones, ya han separado la iglesia. Entonces miren el contexto, will es algo lejano, un deseo, un anhelo. Going to ya es un plan, ya es una intención, ¿no? Que se va a casar el próximo año, ya lo han planeado con su novio. Y ya faltando una semanita, ya está todo arreglado, ya está todo listo para la boda, entonces utilizo un presente continuo. Ahí está la diferencia básica entre estos tres, entre el will, going to y el presente continuo. Ahora, llega el momento de la boda y un invitado llega 2 horas antes o 1 hora antes y uno le dice, oh, the wedding starts at 2 p.m. It's 1 p.m. Como ya está programado que esa boda va a comenzar a las 2 y un invitado llegó a la 1, entonces el otro dice, oh no, the wedding starts at 2 p.m. Utiliza un presente simple. Miren, las 4 estructuras utilizadas en un contexto para que el alumno reconozca, ¿no? Cuáles son los usos de estas estructuras, ¿no? Del will, going to, luego pasamos un presente continuo y terminamos con un presente simple. Ahí están las 4 estructuras. Esa es la diferencia. Sí, dime.
The day before talking about the wedding, the day before some of the relatives can say, she's getting married tomorrow, no?
Exactly. Perfect.
Oh.
Ajá. Perfect. That's it. Day before. Ya está todo arreglado, ¿no? Ya sabe a qué hora va a ser, en qué iglesia. Todo ya está listo. She's getting married tomorrow. Ajá. That's it, perfect. Entonces, miren, el futuro, por eso que al futuro no se le considera un tiempo. Tense, ¿no? Tense no es, porque yo puedo utilizar otros tiempos para hablar del futuro. Puedo utilizar el presente simple, puedo utilizar el presente continuo, puedo utilizar el pasado, como ven ahí el condicional. If he gave me the money tomorrow, I'd use it. It's a hypothetical situation in the future, right? This is the use of the second conditional. You use the second conditional to talk about hypothetical situations in the present or future, but you use the structure of the past. All right? You're using the structure of the past. This is an unreal, no? Present or unreal future. Yeah, tell me.
Thanks so much, teacher. I think so today I get the best information, explanation about this subject, teacher. Will, I'm going to thanks so much.
Okay, don't worry, no. Thanks to you for your attention and your participation. This is so important. This is so important. All right, so let's continue here. Notice, remember that we have two tenses, present tense, past tense. Tenemos dos tiempos, presente, pasado. Futuro no se le considera un tiempo porque tiene varias formas de ser expresado y dentro de esas estructuras puedo utilizar otros tiempos para hablar del futuro. All right? Okay, let's continue. So here you have this. Furthermore, will is capable of expressing ideas older than future time, as in which is an exasperated way of saying he's always doing it. Me dice que el will también no solamente lo utilizo para hablar del futuro, el will también lo puedo utilizar para hablar de acciones que usualmente se repiten, repetitivas, pero exasperantes, que me fastidian, me molestan, ¿no? He will keep pestering me. Seguirá molestándome. Se está hablando de una acción repetitiva y que la molesta, ¿no? La está molestando. Ya no estoy hablando solamente del futuro. Ya el will no se utiliza solamente para el futuro. So, to finish, ya para ir terminando aquí, vamos a hablar de estos verbos. Finite verbs and non-finite verbs. Finite verbs act as a verb. Non-finite verbs do not act as a verb. This is what Abraham said. Notice, they got home very late last night. Got here act as a verb. But notice the other side. They do not act as a verb. Sailing is my favorite sport. Sailing is the ing, but it's not a verb. It's a noun. Sailing is the verb, no? The intensive verb, because it's connecting, no? It's connecting the noun that is sailing with information about the noun. That's why we call the subject complement, no? Piénselo cuando vimos los verbos intensivos o copulativos. El verbo to be es un verbo copulativo, solamente me sirve de conector entre el sujeto, que es sailing, que es el sustantivo, y my favorite sport, que es información sobre el sujeto. Por eso se le llama el complemento del sujeto. It's the subject complement, because it's giving information about the subject, not about the verb. So this is a copulative verb. But notice, non-finite verbs, they do not act as a verb. Another, the second example, act as the main verb of a clause. I live in Germany. Non-finite verbs act as nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. The sleeping cat is brown. Notice, sleeping is not a verb, is not a noun, it's an adjective. The sleeping cat is brown. The third example, indicate person, number, and tense. She was waiting in the room before he came in. Notice, was waiting. You use was because you're indicating the person, third person singular, you use was. Was waiting, you're talking about the tense, past continuous tense. He came, past simple. Notice they indicate person, number, and tense. On the other side, the non-finite verbs, they do not indicate person, number, and tense. She tiptoed around the house so as not to wake anyone, to wake. Here you're using the infinitive form. You don't indicate person. You don't indicate number. You don't indicate tense. Miren, no indica ni persona, ni número, ni tiempo. This is a non-finite verb, to wake anyone. It doesn't have any relationship with the person or number, neither tense. The full example, used in present tense and past tense. You promised me the last ticket. Non-finite verbs are infinitive, gerunds, and participles. ¿Cuáles son los verbos no finitos? Son la forma infinitiva, la forma gerundia y la forma participio. I struggle to understand. I struggle to understand. Ahí estoy utilizando la forma infinitiva, ¿no? Como les mencionaba Abraham hace unos momentitos que tocó este punto, justo. Sabemos que cuando yo tengo dos verbos en inglés, quiero poner dos verbos en inglés juntos. El segundo verbo va bien en forma gerundio, con ing, o bien va en la forma infinitiva, que es el tú. Ahí tengo que acordarme la lista, ¿no? Hay una lista de verbos que son seguidos por gerundio o son seguidos por el infinitivo. Y ese gerundio o ese infinitivo o el participio no van a indicar ni tiempo, ni persona, ni número. No funcionan como el verbo principal, porque ahí el verbo principal es struggle, ¿no? Struggle. El otro es un complemento del verbo, ¿ya? Objeto del verbo, ¿ya? Y se utilizan estas formas, ¿no? La forma infinitiva, la forma gerundia y la forma participio. Acuérdense, cuando hablamos de forma participio puede ser ed o ing también. And the last part. Appear independent and independent clauses. Jean said that he enjoyed painting. Aparecen estos verbos, los finitos, verbos finitos, en cláusulas dependientes o independientes, ¿no? Jean said, es la cláusula dependiente. He enjoyed painting es la cláusula independiente, ¿no? In reported speech, ¿no? We have two clauses, dependent clause and independent clause. Non-finite verbs appear in infinitival, participial, gerund participial clause. Van a aparecer en cláusulas infinitivas, participias o gerundias participias. Kids like to play on computers. Ahí estoy formando una cláusula infinitiva o también se le llama una frase infinitiva. Porque estoy formando to play on computers. Es una frase, una cláusula. Like to play on computers. So, notice here these two differences of verbs, no? The finite verbs and non-finite verbs. Finite verbs are used as a verb. They are the main verb of a clause. They indicate person, number, and tense. They are used in present tense and past tense. And they can appear in dependent and independent clauses. On the other side, the non-finite verbs, they do not act as a verb. They act as noun, adjectives, and adverbs. They do not indicate person, number, and tense. They could be in an infinitive, gerund, or participle form. And they also appear on this kind of clauses, ¿no? Aparecen en este tipo de cláusulas, ¿no? Infinitiva, participia o gerundia. Entonces ahí tenemos estos dos tipos de verbos, que es justo lo que estaba mencionando Abraham, ¿no? Cuando el verbo funciona como sustantivo, ahí es un verbo no finito, porque ya deja de ser verbo. Pasa a ser un sustantivo, pasa a ser un adjetivo, como en la segunda, o hasta un adverbio podemos utilizarlo. Entonces miren, ahí tenemos estos dos tipos de verbos, los verbos finitos y los verbos no finitos, ¿ok? Well, les voy a mandar, justo acá estaba viendo, revisando mi biblioteca, ¿ya? Si puedo les voy a enviar, o si no, la próxima clase. Tengo un librito, tengo varios libritos, y los voy a compartir para que ustedes tengan y formen su bibliografía sobre lo que son los phrasal verbs y idioms. ¿Ustedes han escuchado hablar de los idioms? Idioms. Yes, all right. Este es un librito muy interesante donde ustedes van a revisar ahí bastante sobre los verbos compuestos o verbos fraseales, phrasal verbs, y también sobre los idioms, que también es muy importante conocer. Ahí les voy a mandar para que ustedes practiquen bastante este punto, ¿no? Es muy importante reconocer los verbos compuestos, ¿no? Ese es uno de los puntos cuando uno escucha hablar un nativo, hay veces no entiende, porque ellos utilizan bastante los verbos compuestos y las frases idiomáticas. Y uno a veces solo está con el inglés general, ¿no? Que conoce los libros y todo lo demás. Pero no conocemos tanto el inglés que se utiliza día a día, que utilizan los nativos. Entonces siempre es muy importante saber eso, ¿no? Entonces ahí les voy a mandar el enlace, porque lo tengo en el Drive, para que ustedes, ahorita no lo puedo poner porque no sé qué está pasando con mi Drive, ahora que no carga, se está lento, que les iba a pasar ahora, pero que gire, y no, a ver, no sé qué está pasando con mi Drive, ¿ya? Entonces le voy a mandar ahí un enlace para que ustedes se descarguen este librito, muy interesante, muy bueno, es autodidáctico, ¿no? Porque ahí también van a tener las respuestas, tiene teoría un poquito y tiene varios ejercicios, y esos ejercicios al final tienen sus respuestas, entonces ahí van verificando ustedes si estaban bien o no estaban bien. Eso es autodidáctico, ¿ok? All right, so we are going to finish here. My throat is terrible today too. All right, so thanks a lot for your attention. See you next week. And don't forget to practice a lot. And don't forget to do that. Next class, we are starting another module. Now we are going to pass to talk about the skills. Ahora vamos a pasar a hablar de las habilidades. Reading, writing, listening, speaking, and how to teach them. All right? So we are going to pass to the skills. We finished with the linguistic part. Now we're going to continue with the skills. All right? So that's all for today. See you next class. Take care a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you, teacher. Is there any comment that we have to share?